network,
connection,
industry leaders,
fun,
bonding,
conversation,
storytelling,
folklore,
friends,
informative,
partnerships,
laughter,
insights,
leadership,
best practices,
Timberland,
industry, trends,
land management,
asset management,
forestry,
agriculture,
natural resources,
GIS,
application development,
cloud migration,
e-commerce solutions,
recreational leasing,
due diligence,
technology,
innovation,
data management,
consulting,
land records,
digital transformation,
customer service.
fire starters.
Welcome to the first fire starter campfire session from Orbis. Thank you for joining us today for this first ever campfire session. For those that are not familiar with Orbis, I'm Russell Combs, one of the co-founders and president of Orbis. We're a technology-based company in Charlotte, North Carolina that specializes in assisting the natural resource industry and applying technology to areas such as land management, asset management, recreational leasing, and cloud services. We're excited to kick off this new initiative of the Campfire Session with today's panelists, as well as all you who are tuning in today. As we all know, the events of this last year really forced us to find new ways to connect with each other. We created these Campfire Sessions as a way to connect with old friends, make new friends, share stories, spend time together, and banter about relevant topics in our industry. Today, the topic is supposed to focus on the pandemic effect and how the events of the last year and a half are changing technology and in turn affecting operations in the timberland industry. For now, we're going to do this virtually, but hopefully in the near future, we'll be doing this in person. In the meantime, thank you again for joining us, and thank you for being here. A few housekeeping items before we get to the panelists. We'll be opening up for a QA session at the end, so you can submit your question in the chat window to the right. Just put your question in there and who you'd like to direct that question to, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. And it wouldn't be a good event, a good Orbis event, if we didn't have a raffle and some giveaways, so stick around to the end of the session for those as well. So this past year has really, as everyone knows, has affected us both personally and professionally. We've all had to sacrifice in different ways, day to day, both work and at home. We know that all businesses have been impacted, and the forest industry and land management is no different. Today, we have some of the top industry leaders with us to discuss how the pandemic affected their organization and hear about their technology challenges and also discuss what's next as we start to move into this pandemic. Let me introduce you quickly to our panelists today. For Resource Management Service, we have Rodney Howe, Senior VP of Resource Planning. From Timberland Investment Services, we have Steve Jack, the Managing Director of Forest Management.
Nice to be here.
From American Forest Management, we have the Chief Executive Officer, Brent Kiefer, joining us.
Great. Nice to be here. Nice to be here, guys. Thanks.
From the Forest Land Group is the President and CEO, Mr. Blake Stanley.
Thanks, Russ. Glad to be here.
And lastly, and not least, is one of my partners in Orbis, co-founder and Vice President, Clarence Neese.
Hey, guys. Hey, thanks, everybody.
Thank you again to all the panelists for being here. Let's go. We'll go ahead and get started. This being a campfire session, we put together a few fire starter questions to kind of kick the discussion off and get it going. So our first question is for you, Rodney. When the pandemic brought much of a life to halt last year, many of our businesses had to pivot in how we worked, including evaluating our tech systems and services that we had in place. And how could we continue business as usual, so to speak? Could you just share us a little bit of what the biggest challenges that RMS faced when it came to technology, and how did you guys handle those?
Sure. I'm glad to be here. We appreciate the invitation, Russ and Clarence. So thanks for letting me be here and being a part. I think really the largest, and really maybe this is the softball questions, largest challenge was just maintaining communication through this whole process. Two things, I guess. One would be internal communication. Really, in large part, this became like a disaster recovery scenario for kind of the IT/IS department, where everybody went from going from working in the offices to within a week, everyone was working remotely. I think, fortunately, our IT model supports remote work pretty well, and so the transition wasn't too difficult. I think it was more around the mechanics of transitioning from a work office to a home office. So, we were trying to let folks keep monitors home, or even sometimes chairs and things like that. So I think that was one component of it. The other piece for us is right at the very beginning of all of this. We were transitioning from one virtual meeting software platform to another one. So I guess in some ways you might say, well, that's difficult or tough. I think in a lot of ways it actually worked out being really good, because we had these trainings that were planned. I would say that we were probably variable in our proficiency throughout the organization. So this, in a lot of ways, you got the training and then you were forced to use it. So I think that helped in a lot of ways. Some folks were doing it already that were, had distributed teams in multiple states and countries. But I think it forced that throughout the organization quite a bit more. The other component was the external communication. It may be more interesting is that we've done a lot of that virtual meetings with clients and things like that. So switching to the remote piece was pretty smooth. The more interesting piece was, okay, well, if we're going to do an annual client meeting for Timber Tour, are we going to just cancel it, or are we going to try to do something with this? And so we had some folks that were thinking about this pretty early on, started putting this together to where we ended up doing a virtual client meeting, but instead of really doing 2 long days of meetings, we broke that out, to where there were like 2-hour meetings every day during the week. So it kind of made that a lot more doable from the client's perspective, is trying to sit through those things. And then the other piece was, how are you going to do a timber tour, which really does a lot better when you're in person. But one of the things that we did in that is we created a video that took clients through the value creation, the forest life cycle. We had different senior team members that were interviewed, harvesting manager, forestry manager, on sites in the field. One of our mill partners actually was part of that. And you learn a lot through this process, in this filming and editing process. I would say that I learned that I say "so" an awful lot, so consequently I have this little note over here to try to avoid saying "so." And then I also realized that I'm much balder than the mirror tells me I am when you start seeing the back of the head. So,
Yeah.
I think, wow,
None of us were bad.
That's worse than I thought it was. Yeah. So I mean, overall, it ended up being a pretty positive. We got pretty positive feedback, but we much prefer to be in person. So I guess all that to say, I really think communication was the largest hurdle, but technology today really helped that, and made us successful in spite of it. So.
The communication in person is difficult, let alone when you go through video like this, and even it gets a little more difficult. So you're exactly right. So.
Oh yeah, we all got to learn how to be actors nowadays. So anybody else have any thoughts on that question? Challenges, unique challenges you might have faced, or similar things along those lines?
I was just going to say, we've all had to get used to seeing ourselves on video, and I don't think that gets any easier. And I think I've got Rodney beat for the balding issue. So, but that has been, I was just going to say, though, on that topic, I think a lot of our people just commented that, we are a very distributed company anyway, across many offices. And so the fact that we migrated to seeing people on, virtual meetings type of platforms was actually a real plus, because a lot of these people would have never really seen, who they were talking to if we were kind of doing old, traditional audio conference calls. So it was a real benefit just in people being able to make those kind of connections in the virtual, conferencing space.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's been one of the real positives that you see, even for us from a consulting standpoint. We're able to interact and see our clients, put that name to the face, so to speak, much more readily than we ever were, kind of pre-pandemic levels, so. Great. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Blake, we're gonna start this one off with you. Kind of as we were talking about, we were all pivoting, within our own organizations to deal with the pandemic and the suddenness of it all upon us, last March. It's easy to overlook how those effects affected us outside of organizations, specifically our clients, our investors. Rodney touched on that a little bit, but what challenges could you share, or did you see and hear from your investors and clients as that travel was limited and you needed to interact with them, and how did technology, help you solve those challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Russ. I'll try not to repeat some of what Rodney said, but I think we had some very similar kind of client concerns. Obviously, communication is huge when it comes to investor clients, and all of our investors expect transparency, responsiveness. And so the communication side of it really was the biggest challenge. So as I thought through this question, what are some things we did last year that we haven't done in the past? And Rodney mentioned it. The annual investor meeting is a big part of what we do on the communication side. It's a time when you get together with clients and you have these opportunities to connect in person. The hallway conversations always are very productive, dinners, and clearly we couldn't do that. So we, along with all the other TMOs and every private equity group in the world, was looking at how do we transition from those kind of meetings to something virtual. And for us, that meant trying to take a roughly 3-day event and condense it down into 1 day, and also try to figure out how to make that productive and give folks a feel for what's happening on the ground. I think Rodney mentioned that as well. The woods tour component is usually the highlight of these annual meetings. So the way we tried to deal with that is both the woods tour side and the in-person presentations is through, first off, a high level of information sharing prior to the meeting. Spent a lot of time delivering content to clients over encrypted, password protected kind of platforms that most people would use. And then when the day arrived for the actual meeting, we did have 4 or 5 hours worth of boring time of people staring at video screen and slides. But at least it gave us the chance to interact with clients who had reviewed information beforehand. And we had multiple speakers in different locations, and went through that kind of financial metric presentation, and then had a live Q&A session to follow that. And then on the woods tour side of it, some things that we did that I think were very helpful and will probably last into the future, is the video delivery piece of this allowed us to share case studies from multiple locations. Typically you would have an annual meeting in one site, and you get to review multiple stops in the forest, but it's one region and kind of one sort of focus where you're out in the woods with investors. In this case, we could create video content with case studies from 3 different regions, and included a walk in the woods with the forester who manages the property, as well as some drone footage. And the feedback was good as it relates to that information. How did the whole thing turn out? I think overall the feedback was positive. We had record attendance, maybe for obvious reasons. It's kind of a low lift to get to the meeting and hit the join meeting button. But I think overall it was positive. It was productive. I don't ever see that format replacing an in-person meeting. I think there's just too much benefit from being in person, but I do see some potential in the future for a bit of a hybrid where you can take the best of both sides and have a combination of in-person and virtual. And then if I've got a couple more minutes just to mention a few other examples that are a little different than what Rodney mentioned. We did hear from our investor clients a bit of an increased interest in environmental, social, and governance best practices. And for us, what we tried to do there is we utilized a variety of sources to report on over 80 different ESG and impact related metrics. And we published those in a couple of different reports. One was a 25-year retrospective report, and the other was an annual impact report. Not a lot of detail to provide there on the technology side, but certainly without technology and long-term data management, the metrics that we were reporting on would not have been possible. So that was critical for those reports. We also, this is not so investor related, but we also had continued FSC and SFI certification audits in 2020, as I'm sure a lot of others did. For us, that included, it was 8 or 9 different properties, and about 90% of that work was done virtually. And even including an audit of a property down in Belize that had to be done 100% virtually because you legally couldn't travel to the country from the outside. So we had on-site employees in Belize providing a live video feed to the auditor who was in Mexico. And then we also had participants on our side who were located here in the United States. So that was a challenge for sure. And the feedback that I heard overall was that it was effective, and we proved that it could be done virtually. Certainly, again, you don't get the same level of quality from having folks on the ground being able to see everything that's happening. But I think overall it was productive, and again, maybe some pieces of that will continue into the future to make the on-sites more productive by doing some virtual stuff beforehand. And then lastly, just a couple items that I think were maybe not directly pandemic related, but that were pushed forward by the pandemic. More data delivery and analysis being done outside of the office-based server environment and being pushed into the cloud. And one little example of that is that we had started before the pandemic, but it was accelerated, was the development of a timber stand inspection app that allows for cloud-based storage of things like inspection forms and photos, maps, remediation kind of work. So broad range of examples, but those are some of the things that I think were important for us as we experienced the environment of 2020. Yeah.
No, those are good. Those are all good examples, Blake. That show what we were all facing and challenges that we had to deal with, obstacles you had to overcome because client meetings had to continue and field audits had to continue. So how do we get through those? So shifting gears a little bit, Brent. To kind of throw this next question off to you, kind of somewhat different perspective from the consulting side. Kind of the industry as a whole, at AFM there, you have the opportunity to work with a wide swath of people in the industry, from TMOs to industrial owners to private landowners. Can just curious if you can maybe share your insights a little bit, talk about some of the changes you saw in not only technology, but operationally, how you as AFM were able to interact and connect with that wide range of clients.
Well, thanks, Russ. Yeah, as you say, AFM manages for a lot of different types of clients. We manage for about 1,200 clients that span a wide range of size and complexity and so forth. We cover about 6 million acres of management, over 25 states here in the U.S. and 3 countries. So we do touch a lot of different forest land owners. As I thought back over the last 16 months, I'd say what's been one of the keys to managing through all that. And I just have to say it's been flexibility, flexibility to adjust client operations depending on the operational needs of that client and how that client, was reacting to the pandemic. To do that, we had to stay in close contact with our clients. So, and again, not things that these aren't new things, but things that were heightened, I think, because of the pandemic, maintaining that contact, keeping clients updated on, what we saw happening in the marketplace, and then being able to quickly, pivot or respond to their needs as we learn more information. But, one of the things we noticed as we went through last year, particularly overall, there was very little change in our clients' underlying objectives. And to me, that just reinforced that, forest land investments are very resilient. And I think the pandemic just proved that again in many ways. The other thing I think that we also reminded of, though, is that local markets do matter, and local markets differ and certainly will impact decision making that clients will undertake. Maybe just a few of the operational changes that we did handle for clients during the pandemic. For some clients, we reduced or deferred, I'll say, some of the less essential activities or expenses, maybe some road maintenance that was deferred, or boundary line maintenance. For some cases, it was deferring. We were asked to defer some of the expenditures on the silvicultural treatment side, again, fertilization or maybe PCT, something that could easily be made up in the future. I'd say all those operational changes were very short-lived, very short-term deferrals. The second half of the fourth quarter of 2020, and now certainly in 2021, we're in some cases scrambling as we play catch up on things that may have been put off last year. And then also, I guess, just thinking about other adjustments we made for some clients who are in their harvesting plans. I'd say, again, depending on the market and the objective of the client, in some cases we scaled back harvest and deferred it. In other cases, we actually accelerated the harvest. So again, it was all this being responsive to what a particular client's need or objective was. And I think the other thing that you realize going through another, the situation like we did the last 18 months is that there is a real value and a real benefit of real assets like forest land. And so that I think forest land is shown again in this type of situation that we've experienced. And certainly that's now reflected, I'd say, in this continued strong interest in folks wanting to acquire timberland. From our perspective, in our real estate business, that's just continued to grow and strengthen.
Sure.
The second part of your question, I guess, Russ, as far as what did AFM do operationally to help our clients and to help ourselves? At the very beginning of the pandemic, AFM implemented some, I would say, very comprehensive and strict, COVID operating protocols. Again, we're spread across 50 offices across the U.S. and Central America, so we were really focused on maintaining, protocols that would, help with, maintaining health and safety of not our employees, but our customers and contractors. So that was, critical. We wanted to make sure we maintain, a healthy workforce in order to be able to meet our clients' requirements. And certainly we all quickly learned how to effectively work remotely. And I'm really proud of our AFM employees, how they were really able to maintain, I feel like, a really high level of service to our clients without missing a beat. On the technology side, as already Rodney and Blake have mentioned, it's all about the technology that facilitated communication and collaboration. I don't know how we would have gotten through without tools like, whether it be Teams or Zoom and whatever platform, combinations of platforms really that we implemented. And so our employees and our clients, I say, really quickly embraced that new way of doing business. And the other thing as well, I think that Blake mentioned, we were already on a journey migrating broader applications and systems to cloud-based computed environments, and we just continued that. And I think it really just raised the importance of that flexibility and reliability and the ability to access systems in a remote environment. And then maybe really just the last thing I'll mention with technology, again, this has already been touched on, but it was since so many clients could not come to their property, couldn't come to the field, we did as well utilize more imagery, video capture using drones to provide clients, updates on, how things were going on their property, and particularly on work we were doing. I'd say we do a lot of work in the space of assisting on, acquisition due diligence for clients, and so the client couldn't come to visit the property, but we, made sure we really were utilizing a lot of different technology to take what we were seeing. Our local forester was able to see on the ground and transmit that and share that with the client. So there are a lot of ups and downs, as we've all experienced, but I say overall the pandemic was really an opportunity for us to get better at being adaptable and innovative.
Yeah, no doubt, I agree, Brent. I think you highlighted the things a lot of us are seeing and hearing. That communication's a key, and being able to have those tools and processes in place are helpful. That really, as we transition over to Steve. Steve, from an operations standpoint as well, you kind of different organization. Being a TMO, management investor. Operationally, I thought to you as well to get your thoughts. Be curious to get your thoughts and input on how did the pandemic affect TIR and what you guys ended up doing differently. And also, Steve, I know it wasn't exactly on the question, but if you don't mind, touch base a little bit on some of the stuff that TR, I know you guys already had in pre-pandemic. You guys were, kind of positioned for some of that heading into it. I think that'd be interesting for everyone to hear too. So.
Sure. Thanks, Russ. And I'll start with the technology side, and things went real smoothly from our perspective. And I attribute that to a project that we kicked off in 2016, where we made the decision to make a significant investment in our technology platform. And so by 2018, really anybody could work remotely and still access everything as if they were in the office. So we had gotten used to that. Of course, we're a geographically spread out team, and we're used to doing business by the phone and video conference. But this investment that we made, there are really three key areas, and I've heard some of the folks already touch on that, but we transitioned from on-site server-based local area network to the cloud like others. We migrated our content management system to SharePoint and Teams, and we moved our video conferencing from Skype to Teams. So all that was in place by 2018, and we had used them. I will say that we didn't turn on the video very often, but that has changed, I think. We are spread out a bunch, and we would get on the phone and talk, and I wouldn't see a forester for a couple months, and here you're at least seeing their face and seeing how they respond to, they're kind of their nonverbals, how they're responding to what we're discussing. Yeah. So it's all good. When the pandemic hit, we did do a couple things. We went out and bought some laptops, fortunately ahead of the surge, and we moved to Adobe Sign software, which Looking back on it and where we are today, it significantly improved the workflow process around reviewing and approving documents and gathering signatures. So that was super helpful. Brent, you mentioned flexibility, and I think that's just want to highlight that is just trying to remain very flexible with your clients, basically everybody we do business with, including our employees. Again, I'd say half our company is used to working remotely, whether it's in a hotel room or in your pickup truck, or client meetings offsite, whatever it may be. We were used to it. What we were, I don't want to say hesitant on, but we were watching closely was our finance and accounting department that is not used to working remotely. And you put that on top of, this was March. Well, what's happening in March? You're getting ready to close. You're still working through audits and closing the books for the year. You're getting ready to close the books for Q1. Again, audits, and they went home, and at the end of April, we looked back on it. We said, man, everything worked out really smoothly. It took some effort and some getting used to, but they did a good job. Operationally, fortunately, things there wasn't a lot of change. We remained flexible in the marketplace. With what we were doing. Of course, a lot of the mills felt like demand was going to fall off the cliff, and so they shut down. And so we pivoted, and we sold timber as we felt was appropriate given the market conditions. And so again, not a lot changed. On the client side, I will say that maybe great minds think alike, but we had to be flexible there with our clients. Whether it was existing clients and giving them quarterly updates, or if it was a due diligence type meeting, we did video conferencing, and then we got a little creative with the videos too, out in the woods. And to your points earlier, it's a day and a half type of meeting usually. Half day in the meeting. In the office meeting, and then a day of maybe the second half of that first day, and finish up the next day out in the field, may visit a mill. And so we did the same thing. We made some short videos, and we're able to jump around and cover a bunch of ground in an hour and a half of videos versus a full day of banging around in the pickup truck. So again, we remain flexible. And our technology certainly helped us stay in contact with one another and maintain that the ability to stay in contact with our clients.
Yeah, no, that great. That's great insight. Your comments there, Steve, made me think of one thing. I thought to the panelists, did anybody engage new clients? During the pandemic, that was a challenge. I know we at Orbis faced, actually started working with a few groups we'd never worked for. We still haven't seen them in person, but engaging somebody brand new you don't have a relationship with, totally virtual. I don't know if you guys had any of that experience, during the last, 15, 16 years.
Yeah, we did.
Go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
I was just saying we did engage with some new clients.
Yeah, we did as well, Russ. Quite a few new clients, and again, it was all, for the most part, all virtual, and I say it has been pretty seamless, amazingly.
Yeah, that's great. So, all right, I know Clarence is dying to talk. I think this is the longest he's probably ever gone without talking. So. So Clarence, I'm gonna throw this question out to you to get your thoughts. You, of course, throughout the pandemic, you never stopped talking, so nothing's different there. But based on what you saw and heard all during from clients, from colleagues, what recommendations or insight could you give? As we start to move forward to see kind of the end to the pandemic.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Russ. Yeah, I talk to everybody every day. That's my job, in some respects. And what I found and to this day that clients are still looking at their digital readiness on whether or not they are, all their information, all their equipment, all their security and stuff is in place. I mean, our One Connect platform, our payment platform, we got in place for a lot of clients, and during the pandemic, of course, but after the pandemic has kind of subsided, excuse me, it is really still taken off. Clients are really still, looking at that kind of stuff. And then, behind that, of course, and everybody talked about it on the panel today, and that was the Office 365. I mean, your software, your security, your user management, your data storage, all in the cloud. I mean, that's just a great example of all that stuff. So, so our property tax management, our land record stuff is all taken off, just like, again, a lot of us had it in place, but we weren't really, I don't say digitally ready, but we were ready. But now we're going back and looking at that. And of course, again, Blake talked about this, and so did Rodney. Security is so important. None of us want to be the next Colonial Pipeline. And so we don't want to be on the news for any reason. So security is so important. So clients are talking to us on a daily basis about security and about how to be ready for what's going to happen next. And when I say that next, not like pandemic, it's as simple as a power outage or a tropical storm is what can cause us to make sure that we're ready for the next thing to happen. So,
yeah, one thing I'd add to that, Clarence, too, that we saw is kind of the stress that we've seen from different clients on their IT staff and department. Where a lot of our organizations, force industry, IT is some of the last parts of the organization that get staffing, and a lot of it's outsourced. So that planning for that and dealing with that is something that we saw too, that I think a lot of people are going to address strategically going forward, because without that backbone, none of this communication and interaction would really happen. So
yep.
So great. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here for a second. We want to engage the audience a little bit. So if everyone take a look at their screen, you should see a poll question popping up. And if you can use your chat window to submit answers to the question, and you'll be entered into a raffle drawing for a prize pack. So the question within our industry: what do you think is the most important area to make sure that we improve upon as we come out of the pandemic? So the choices there are simple to the cloud, that migration to the cloud, the digitizing information, basically, trying to sever that complete reliance on the paper trail, the old historical paper trail. Improving the customer or user experience with technology. We've talked about communication, but what greater, deeper interactions can we have? Or updating key software and data management services and operations. So if you want to be entered for the drawing of the raffle, and don't mind answering the poll, and we'll share the results of the poll here in a few minutes at the end of the session. All right, we've got one last few questions I want to throw out to the panel before we open up to the audience for some Q&A session. So kind of want to go around the horn and get a temperature check, so to speak, on a few topics. So I'm going to just kind of go around the horn here and ask you guys. I'm going to ask you guys that kind of speak out and say if you think this topic is still burning, meaning you think this is something we'll be dealing with, integrating into our workflows, our operations, kind of here to stay in our industry, or if you think the fire's out. Meaning, hey, this item's over. We're kind of past this, and we're not really going to be kind of phasing this out of our daily experiences. And so if you're a comment or two about each of them, that's fine as well. So I'll start off with Clarence. He can kind of show you the format. So Clarence, I'll start with you. In-person conferences.
Is it burning? Still burning? In-person conferences are going to happen. I think we're still going to have that. I went to one the other day last week, and they still had the virtual part and the in-conference people part. So I think we're going to see a lot of parallel running of conferences for a little while, Russ. But yeah, I think it's still burning.
It's still burning. All right. The second one, Blake, I'm going to throw this one out to you. Virtual field audits. You touched on this a little bit, but
I think the fire's going out.
Okay.
I can see some use of virtual for parts of the audit, but I think getting those back to an in-person situation for the field component will be important.
Yep. Okay. I'll throw this one out to Rodney. Subscription model software services. So kind of software as a service, or utilizing any third party, software platform for, support operational accounting needs, anything along those lines.
You're either in a situation where you're trying to become a software developer, or you're trying to customize that out. And I think there's a lot of risk built into that. So I think that when you look at software, the subscription model, I think that's still going to be running for sure.
Great. So, and I'll throw this one out to you, Steve. Kind of virtual real estate closings.
Virtual real estate closings. With respect to our industry, or the housing market in today's environment. I think if it's the housing market, I can see that DocuSign, and you maybe bought it on sight unseen in today's market. In the Timberland business, I think there's a lot of it is virtual, and you're signing and sending documents when you're buying Timberland. So I think that continues.
Okay, good. Kind of on-property client tours. I think we touched on this, but Brent, you got any thoughts on that one?
Well, I guess from a burning standpoint, I think that will continue to burn, and the fact that I think we'll continue to utilize more technology, whether it be imagery or on in-field video. I think that will continue to utilize. I think it really provides you some really good tools that clients seem to really appreciate.
That's good. And this one, maybe go around the room. I don't think it might not directly apply to somebody, but it's kind of online payments or transactions. There's lots of things in our industry that money changes hands on, from timber sales to leases to, any type of transaction. You guys see any reason that doesn't continue to still burn?
Continues to burn. I think a lot of it's just around efficiency, and that's a pretty effective methodology.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a look at our audience pool now. So we got the results for that. So the winner of the pool was updating key software, followed by simplifying the ability and transferring my operations to the cloud. So thanks to everybody for doing that. We'll be selecting 2 names to send out prize packs to. So you'll be hearing from us over the coming week or so. So, all right, we'll shift over and get some questions from the audience now. Blake. All right, this is for Blake. How would you describe COVID's effect on underlying investor sentiment with Timberland? Has there been a major pullback or renewed interest? And that's from John Gifford.
It's a good question. I would say that there's a renewed interest coming out of COVID. I don't know if it's directly tied to COVID, but I think the pandemic certainly has added to that interest level. I think it was Brent that mentioned before the fact that real assets and forest land did pretty well and was an asset that folks relied on and were happy about during the pandemic. I think you have a lot of other factors that are coming into play now. I mean, things like inflation discussion, the fact that the housing market's in the middle of what should be a multi-year boom, a lot of impacts of maybe the reopening that are helping out there. You've also got a lot of increased volatility in the markets in general. I think that helps Timberland from the safety perspective, new markets for ecosystem services. So there's a lot of things that I think are creating some tailwinds for Timberland investment in general.
That's good. Thanks for that. So go to the second question. This is a burning question and this is really kind of for all the panelists, which are shared. It says, are your companies coming back to the office, or does this make you rethink your work from home as a solution?
That's from Troy Harris.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody wants to
raise your hand
tackle that, but
Yeah, TIR is pretty much back at the office for the most part.
Yeah, I would say we're back at the office, although there are individuals that they've got particular concerns where they've got extenuating circumstances, things like that. Everybody has their own ability to make decisions, that are appropriate for their particular circumstance. So I think that's kind of how we've handled it. We've given flexibility for our folks to make decisions that's right for them. But generally, the offices are open.
We're similar, Rodney. We're back at the office, but with added flexibility.
Yeah. I'd say we're fairly similar to that. We're certainly providing a lot more flexibility than we probably did in the past, and I would say ours is a bit more of a hybrid kind of model, and just to allow, again, flexibility was kind of one of my key points, and I think that also goes to kind of the work environment.
Yeah. No, that's good. The another question, and this wasn't necessarily directed at any one panelist, but how did you handle your appraisal requirements in 2020? Anybody wants to jump in there?
I can comment. I mean, we kept right along with the typical appraisal process. It was difficult. Appraisers were nervous, and there were very few comps. But the appraisals that needed to be done, we followed through with them.
Yeah, I don't believe we had any interruption in our appraisal schedule. We got them in. It might have been a little bit more difficult for the appraiser to get out to the woods, but my recollection is everything came in on schedule.
Yeah, as a provider of appraisal services, our appraisers our team of appraisers are located throughout the country, fairly regionally, so they, for the most part, didn't have any issues getting out to do any property inspection type of work.
Well, that's good. So, and I think our probably last question is, are any of the current supply shortages that you see, is that affecting your operations in any way? There's kind of random things that are in short supply or have been in short supply over the pandemic period. Did that impact your companies or your operations in any way?
Yes,
I can comment there. The thing that we hear the most from customers is about labor shortages in general, and that sawmill customers have a hard time keeping workers, the logging force. So those are really kind of I think labor is the biggest issue that I hear about.
Brent, did you have a comment? I saw you.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say our foresters put we put over 5 million miles a year on pickup trucks as a company, and getting new pickup trucks. We replace, we're turning that fleet over, 10 to 15 to 20% a year, and it's really hard to get trucks right now. So that's been a real challenge, to be honest.
Yeah, I've noticed that exact same thing. In fact, I was looking to trade my truck in, and I went to a lot, and I was amazed at the fact that there's like 6 pickups on the whole lot. There's space there for like 100 of them.
And they were all yellow.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for those questions, audience. Okay. All right. We're going to close things out here with a little raffle off a few items. So everyone who's logged in, you've been entered into the raffle wheel here. So we're going to spin the wheel to see who our winners are. So the first thing we're going to give away is an Arctic backpack cooler.
Here comes the wheel. Oh, shit.
Robert Chambers.
Bob Chambers won it.
Was the winner.
He sent in a question, too.
Thank you, Bob.
Congratulations, Bob.
All right. The second prize we're going to give away here is an REI gift card. Great for late summer, fall. Mike DiCarlo won that REI gift card. Congratulations, Mike. Enjoy that.
Yeah, thank you for coming in.
Okay, our last thing that we're third prize we'll give away here is going to be a pop-up fire pit and grill. This is a pretty neat item here. So. Andrew Freeman. Congratulations, Andrew. Enjoy that. For all you winners, we'll be contacting you and getting those items shipped out to you. So that kind of concludes this first campfire session. We greatly appreciate it. And special thanks to all the panelists for your time and sharing your insights and experiences. And of course, thanks to everyone who signed and tuned in. We'll be doing additional campfire sessions here over the coming months. The next one is going to be in September and even later in the fall. For those who might be attending the Amelia Island Timber Investment Conference, we're going to be planning a live event there. So please stay tuned to our LinkedIn and Twitter social media accounts for more information as those come out. So thank you again, and look forward to talking to everybody in person in the future, but if not, virtually here again in September.
Thanks, Blake. Thanks,
Take
guys.
care, and thank you, guys. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks for putting us on, guys.